G'day folks, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a video for the new shooters, for the people who are looking at getting into precision long range shooting and they quite regularly run past a rifle that they're going to use or ask for recommendation of what they are going to do. And it's something that I try not to do in an individual basis on the channel because it always depends about so many details. But as an overall thing, what I would say, and when I really do think about it, I've sort of been there before with what I'd recommend to start with. If you're getting into long range precision shooting, so whether that's going all the way to ELR shooting, or it's just long range precision, which might just be 400 meters, trying to get 500 meters type thing. Most people have a goal of getting to 1,000 meters or 1,000 yards. But actually that's where they want to get to. But they want to learn and buy something that can get them into that place and they can get to that area. And I suppose some people come up with, well, obviously all the manufacturers are trying to sell their new rifle, whether it's a Remington or whether it's a Browning or whether it's a Tikka or whether it's a Savage or whether it's all the Howard, whatever, all the bits and pieces, all the different rifles from the elite stuff where people are spending $10,000 on a rifle to the really basic stuff where you're only spending $1,000 or $700 for a rifle, all the in-betweens. I would say largely, obviously, it depends on your back pocket, what you can afford. But it's not just the initial cost that matters. And I suppose my way of looking at it is buying something that's as simple as possible for you to be able to take the right direction with, rather than buying twice. Now, if you're allowed all the guns in the world, you've got all the money in the world, then what's it matter? You can buy whatever you want and get to the same place. But in the rifle side of things, I would tend to go with, and I'll sort of walk through that a little bit. But to start off with, what cartridge were we talking about? In the modern slang, what caliber were we talking about? Of course, I'm actually talking about the chambering. But what I would talk about, and when I think about it over and over, no matter how I look at it, what I come up with is the best place to start is the boring old 308 Winchester. I truly believe it's the best place to start. Yes, there's things that perform better, there's things with less recoil, there's things with more power, there's things with all sorts of things you can say one way or the other way. But in the way of something that will do the job properly, something that you will learn with properly, something you get all sorts of ammunition from all over the world, it's always on the gun shop shelves, there's good stuff in the way of there's gold medal stuff. It's been used for target shooting. It's been used for hunting. It's been used for everything. The 308. I believe it's the best place to start. I believe you'll learn the most from starting with a 308 and you really can't go wrong in that place. Yes, whether it's the 260 Remington or the 6.5 Creedmoor or the 6mm Creedmoor or the whatever it is, all the new things and there'll be another 3 of them by the time the next 5 years goes past anyway. That can outperform it and deal with the wind better and all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, you're not talking about winning. If you're talking about starting, you're talking about learning. You learn best by dealing with things a little better. You could come right down to a 223 Remington and get similar sort of results with less recoil. But I believe a certain amount of learning to manage your recoil properly. The 308 has the right amount to not being too much. You put it in a very light gun or put it in a very bad setup, okay, it can be a bit hard to handle. That's your job to make sure that it hasn't got too hard a butt pad and it's not too light and all those bits and pieces. Learning to go into long range precision shooting is not trying to get the ideal hunting rifle, the ideal combination of doing everything. That's a different question. That's a different combination, a different cartridge you'd be talking about there, and there's other choices. You already have a 260 Remington in the cupboard, it's your dad's and you want to use it, yeah, it's fine to use. There's all sorts of other conversations, but when you're simply focusing on going and buying something and you want it to be able to teach you as fast as it can and as well as it can and as thoroughly as it can and still be competitive if you do go into the beginning of competitions and that sort of stuff, but with learning flat out, then the 308 does. The 308 does a very good job. Now that's partially through the fact of, yes, it can do all those jobs really well. It doesn't deal with the wind quite as well as a as some of the modern cartridges, like I said, and the other cartridges I'm talking about. But that's not particularly a bad thing. If you're learning, you need to be learning a little bit more. It's got a little more recoil than some of those because it's a heavier bullet that you're pushing. But that's also, if you set your rifle up properly and you manage it properly, the absolute best way to learn. The likes of the Magnums, whether that's a 6.5 PRC or that's a 7mm Remington Magnum, or that's a 300 Win Mag, or that's even the 30-06, which isn't a Magnum, but there's a bit more recoil in that neck of the woods. I don't believe that's a better place to start. It's not necessarily a bad place to start, but I don't believe it's a better place to start. I think the 308 has a really nice balance. So the 308 is what I would go with, and like I said, the moment you've got there's already one in the cupboard that's a different caliber, or you're trying to win a competition as well, you're trying to go hunting as well, that changes it, but that's one of the things that comes down to your individual situation. In the general, and you're buying one for the first time, you want to go and do this, apart from you should already have a 22 long rifle, in my opinion. A 22 long rifle is the best way to start the process of trigger control and form and all those bits and pieces. Absolutely marvelous thing to have. You should have one, I think, regardless. But the moment you're going to long range precision, then and want to go to stepping up to centerfire, there's more power, then I'd go the 308. Now, the next bit is to what 308? Well, listen, the sky's the limit in some fashions, in the way of there isn't really a better action or even a worse action. In all the stuff you can buy nowadays, all does a good job. As for spending a lot of money on the original rifle and trying to get one that does everything, so it's got all the bells and whistles, it's got the right chassis, it's got the right back, it's got the right front, it's got the right top, all that sort of stuff, I suppose there is no such thing as the right one to start off with. Yes, some of the manufacturers put together pretty good packages, but is it going to suit you actually if you don't know? I would go fairly simple. You can go with the likes of a Hauer, which you can buy in a barreled action and then get your own chassis and that sort of stuff. Or you can start where I did, where it's just a basic stock. I did the basic work with it and I started to learn to shoot, started to figure out what suited me. Now, whether that's going to, this was my original 308 that went through Cheval chassis, and now it looks like this with a GRS stock on it. But that's the 308 in the, that's still its factory barrel. It's still shot out over 2,000 meters. It's done the bits and pieces, but it's a Remington 700. But that's not what this is about. You could do in all sorts of forms. The only thing I would say is to make sure the action you're getting can be upgraded properly. And that means in the likes of the rail on top there, the likes of that you can get, it probably comes with a 20 MOA rail for the scope. I should point at a rifle, that's what I'm looking over there for. So likes of the scope rail, you can get the various scope rails for it. So in Tickers you can, in Hauers you can, in Remingtons you can, in Savages you can. You start to get to some of the Brownings and some of the other ones where some of the Seikos, it gets a bit more complicated. You can't necessarily get custom rails for it. So that's an important thing. The trigger, that you can upgrade the trigger. It might be good enough, but do some research on that sort of stuff. The likes of even a bolt knob can be a thing that becomes frustrating. It's fine what you've got, but upgrading it's a problem versus upgrading it versus what you want. Now, none of these things are deal breakers. I'd say the main bit would be that you can get chassis, you can get inletted chassis to suit, I'll put it this way again. You can get inletted chassis, so an inletted stock. So whether that's a wood stock in the likes of a Boyd stock, or that's buying a MDT in the likes of the chassis, or it's whatever it is, you have the ambition to have that sort of thing, and that seems to suit you. Make sure that the action can go into it. Don't get something that is only basically you can buy it with that stock and that's all you can really get for it. That doesn't really work. So make sure it's upgradable is the main thing I would say. The next bit that goes with it, yes, budget's relevant. It doesn't change too much in the way of accuracy when it comes down to a barrel and an action is the truth of it. Trigger, getting a good trigger versus a crappy trigger and having to replace the trigger. Yeah, there's a bit of money to save. Not necessarily a terrible thing to go through in the learning process. The only important bit that I would say is make sure, we're talking a 308, is make sure you've got a reasonably heavy barrel. You don't want a sporter barrel, you want a reasonably heavy barrel. Lengthwise, listen, it doesn't matter that much to be truthful in the learning process. I would tend to go with a 308 in 26 inches, but whether it's 24 inches, 22 inches, 20 inches, 28 inches, it doesn't make enough difference to be a deal breaker on that sort of stuff. The twist does. That one I spoke about there, as much as it's done things for me, that was a 1 in 12 twist is what it came out with. Not an uncommon twist, not as popular nowadays, but it stopped me at only I was just getting away with a 175 grain bullet. So absolutely fine for target shooting and even going up to 1,000 meters, it all worked fine. But really going to 1 in 10 twist, which is a little bit more common now, would be what I would go with nowadays. But like I said, in a heavy barrel. Threaded, yeah, that's probably a good option. Keep in mind, for a lot of people, yes, I shoot a 308 with a muzzle brake. It's nicer to shoot with a muzzle brake without any questions, but most people are getting into this are going to start at a range. In most ranges, muzzle brakes aren't allowed. Not because they're awkward people, because they make it really uncomfortable with the person alongside you. So that's why muzzle brakes are not allowed in ranges, especially when you've got a covered range and you've got all this blast around you. They definitely push the noise around and ricochet it off everything. So they're unpleasant to be around. So if you can run a suppressor at your range, okay, that answers that question. I would still go with threaded if it was the chance of being able to use it elsewhere and run a muzzle brake on it when you can do that. But otherwise, the weight of the rifle is important. The opposite to a hunting, stalking rifle. A bit more weight in the rifle, be that the heavier chassis, certainly in the heavier barrel side of things, and going with a steel rail rather than aluminium rail and putting weight into things actually helps them shoot. Once again, I'd come back to 308 is where I'd go. Like I said, as to the combination, buying something that's fully tricked out and got all the bits and pieces, listen, it really comes down to your money. It really comes down to how much you already know and are certain about. I would tend to steer away from the package deals that seem to have everything, because largely you're going to find that only some of that's going to work for you. It depends, individual things, it really works. You've gone through and analysed all those bits and pieces, but I would tend to go with the basic setup. You use it like that, you learn it like that, and then you upgrade the thing as you go. This is talking once again about someone getting into it and learning it. So as you upgrade it, you start to feel the differences of things, you start to understand what you're doing. And I suppose on that fault, we are a resource. There is lots of stuff on the channel, lots of how things work, whether it's muzzle jump or it's how muzzle brakes work or it's how setting up a scope or all those bits and pieces, but it's all over the internet also. But you can go through that process and really make it work for you to become into wherever you're going. Once again, I'd stress, if you're talking about winning competitions, yes, the 308 can do it, but it's got a little bit of a disadvantage when it comes to winning, when it comes to training, when it comes to learning, when it becomes becoming a better shooter, and that includes going out to ELR side of things, then I still firmly believe, and I would recommend the 308 as what I feel is the best place to start for I was going to say extreme long range, but for long range precision, I think it is the best place to start. I think it'll teach you the most, and I think it's always there. It's a really good round, a really good cartridge or chambered rifle to have in the cupboard, because ammunition is always there. Anyway, guys, that's that one there. I'm sure there's lots of people who've got other thoughts to go with it. Put them in the comments below. Thank you very much for checking in. I'll catch you next time.